Hello there, welcome to another episode of World of Tanks with Ungainly Titan. We're here on Red Sheer 1944 and the first battle. I'm actually two battles on this video. I've decided going to experiment with a little bit of my formats, but I had two short battles and I thought it'd make one decent video rather than showing them as individual battles or showing one and maybe not showing the other at all. So the first battle is the AMX Chaffee. It is Tier 8 battle really, but we're a Tier 7 tank and there's a lot good few Tier 7s and Tier 6s. And Red Sheer, well, I'm going out into kind of the traditional Red Sheer scouting run here onto this ridge in front of me. Now haven't done it recently in Red Sheer 1944. I think Red Sheer 1944 plays differently and is viable to play it differently. And in heavy tanks, I actually tend to go down the western side, down the one line, whereas I think that in regular Red Sheer, the zero line attack is probably more important. The problem with the one line attack on regular Red Sheer is you got pinned down. You tend to get pinned down by tanks in the high ground, whereas with the cover of the castle, you've got more opportunities on that location in Red Sheer 1944. However, we've been driving around a bit. We've picked up a few spots, but we haven't, not many though, and not as many as you would get sometimes on this location, or as many as you might get on the regular Red Sheer. People tend not to go to the zero line as much though, and they tend to take different approaches, whereas you get a lot more inclined to come down along the river line in Red Sheer 1944. Now we're starting to pick up a few more spots and we've managed to get some damage in as well. But so far, nobody's been in a position to take advantage of the tanks we've been spotting or to shoot back or shoot at the tanks that we've been spotting for them. I suppose one of the major differences is there's nobody actually on the crest of the ridgeline. The one behind me, or yeah, the one there in the centre of the map, they're more down on the low ground. On the western side, engaging the tank destroyer rather than being on top of the ridge, shooting across the hill that I'm on into the next area. Now I've picked up two spotting ribbons while I was talking there, and the two spotting ribbons do 74 points of assisted damage between the two of them, which is remarkably low. I mean, I actually finish up with a bit more assisted damage, but for the bulk of the assisted damage, I think I was averaging around 44 points per assisted damage ribbon, and I think the last ribbon was worth about 140 or 150 points. And my reaction when I played through the video the first time and saw the value of the assisted damage compared to the number of assisted damage ribbons, I was wondering who brought the Matilda. Where was the tank doing 46 points of average damage in the game, because most of even the Tier 6 tanks are probably doing more than 44 points of damage on average. I would say even on the low end of Tier 6 you're probably doing 60 to 70 points of damage for some of the low end stock Tier 6 guns, and in a lot of cases you'd probably be expected to do around 180, 190. That kind of damage. The Tier 7s are probably doing 140 odd, and the Tier 8s are around 200, 250 points of damage, depending on where they are in the sort of the tech tree or the order of the packages. Some of the lower stock Tier 8 guns will probably be high-end Tier 7 guns, so they'd be doing around 110 to 150 points of damage as well. Also, this isn't the only game where I've observed this phenomenon, where I've observed getting a decent amount of assisted damage ribbons and having actually very low assisted damage numbers to go with them, where you're looking at 50 or 60 points of damage per ribbon kind of territory, below 100 points of damage per ribbon kind of territory, even though you're in a relatively high tier game. Now, one of the explanations, of course, is sometimes you're spotting tanks with very low health, and people are actually finishing off tanks that you're spotting on very low health. But I don't think that's particularly the case in this game. I think the tanks that I was picking up the ribbons for had actually pretty good health at the time. I suspect what I'm looking at is actually people using high explosives. probably people at the bottom tier who don't know about weak spots in tanks, and they don't know, maybe they don't even know about premium. They certainly might know about crew skills. They might not have equipment in their tanks and various other things like that, but they get frustrated. They're shooting at the best of their ability and they're making no impression, so they start using high explosives because it does some damage anyway, even if they might do a lot better with armor-piercing ammunition. And I know of players that have done that. I mean, certainly on the PC side, I know of people that I know who have played it, and they tend to, at the bottom tier, actually spam high explosives because they feel they can't afford premium on a standard account, and they don't know the weak spots well enough to reliably penetrate. So they spam high explosives. Now, some of them wouldn't be necessarily just relying on auto-aim. But I think if you are relying on auto-aim and you're using high explosives, it can kind of work. The auto-aim from the front tends to point the gun at the gun mantlet, which is probably the strongest armoured piece of most tanks. There are exceptions. Churchill's come to mind. But I think it's one of the failures of wargaming with these whole series of games that I think they're very bad at communicating how to play the game well. And I think there's a lot of players take up, things like using high explosive spam to do damage because they get frustrated about their total inability to do damage with regular ammunition. So they do damage with high explosives instead, because they will get some damage done with high explosives, even though it might be very, very suboptimal. And they're not using high explosives because they think it has the bigger numbers. They are aware that the damage potential of high explosives and the numbers they get in reality aren't anyway connected, and they'd be better off probably using armor piercing. But they just can't seem to penetrate with armor piercing, so they can't use armor piercing reliably. So they go for the high explosives because it has a reliable damage output, even if it is massively subpar. So if you're one of these people and happen to watch this video, please stop using high explosives. There is a time and a place for high explosives, but using it because you can't hit weak spots or you don't know where the weak spots are is not the most effective way of using it. It will work, and it can be well worthwhile in cases where a tank is in very low health, or you're pinned down against a tank whose frontal armour you just cannot penetrate. Sometimes spamming high explosives is the best thing you can do in those situations. But you're better off if you could use or could penetrate the tank, or knew where to penetrate the tank with armor-piercing ammunition, or with premium ammunition. Judicious use of premium ammunition will work. You just will have to grind out the silver with tanks that you'll make a profit on. Not every tank, the premium ammunition. At these kind of levels, generally you could probably spam quite a bit of premium ammunition without losing too much money if you are actually managing to penetrate with the premium shots. The problem is if you're bouncing the premium, then you're in much deeper trouble. This game here on the Lycan on Panama actually reinforces the point I'm making about assisted damage. I think I get one assisted damage ribbon in the entire game, and it's like 36 or 38 points of assisted damage. I suppose the other possible source is that people are shooting into the tracks, and they're not. The tracks are absorbing ammunition. That's another thing I have noticed is people. The other side of the problem is people who are spamming premium, not always doing it to the best of effect. There are generally two kinds of premium ammunition in the game. There's heat and there is APCR. There is a third kind, which is Hesh, which is British only, and it's pretty high tier. I don't think you see British Hesh prior to the Churchill 7.1 or the Centurion 7.1, the Conway with the top guns, the 105mm guns and the 120mm guns. I think it's APCR on the Tortoise. So you don't see it on the Tortoise. You see it in the Death Star and stuff like that. But Hesh is a special case. And and the standard ammunition on the Centurion's APCR anyway. But a lot of the German tanks premium ammunition, even at relatively low tiers, I think as low as tier 6, maybe tier 7 anyway, quite a lot of the German ammunition can be heat. And one of the things about heat is that heat could be another source of these low assisted damage ribbons. Heat frequently has no effect if you fire it into the tracks of an enemy tank. So if you shoot heat at an enemy tank that's sideways on and it hits the tracks, or in the case of Soviet tanks, it hits the spaced armor above the tracks, the heat tends to have no effect. The spaced armor and the tracks absorb all the incoming energy of the heat round, and you get no actual penetration of the armor or the integrity of the tank itself. So while APCR is generally good for any circumstances, and the biggest problem with APCR is actually that its effectiveness drops with distance faster than regular armor piercing ammunition. But sometimes it's still more effective but it can still be more effective to use APCR even at range than the regular AP, simply because the higher penetration is just enough, even though it loses the kinetic energy over distance more rapidly than regular AP. It can still be enough to make the difference even at range. However, heat tends to be doesn't lose penetration over distance, but it will lose penetration if it hits into spaced armor. It works basically best against flat armor. So that could be another source of these extraordinarily low numbers that I often see getting, because I've seen people spam heat quite a lot in games as well, even though they'd be better off in the circumstances to maybe use regular armor piercing ammunition rather than the heat rounds in terms of penetration, chances and damage. So the executive summary of this video is, I suppose, that if you are one of these people that have trouble penetrating with regular ammunition against enemy tanks, particularly higher tier enemy tanks, then A, learn the weak spots. Lower front plate usually a good target. Commander's hatches are usually a good target. If you can't shoot them from the front, go somewhere else and try and shoot them from the side or the rear. You're not obliged to sit there in front of them and trade shots. Withdraw. Find another place to be, and maybe find plunging fire like this here now. For instance, I have almost no chance of penetrating the front of an AT-15. Even the commander's hatch has no chance. But what I'm trying to do is put rounds through the roof, because the roof I think is only 45mm of armor or something like that. So I can penetrate that no problem. But the main reason I can penetrate the roof is I'm on higher ground and he's sloped facing downwards. So I've got a chance of putting a round through them. Now I don't know if I'd put a round through the front of a Chrysler K. I'm going for the drive wheel there because it would give my ally an advantage if he was tracked. But he's dead before I get the round off, so I go back annoying the AT-15. And again we put the odd round through the roof. Now when he pulls up here, he's going to start turning his sight towards me, and I'm able to put it through the side armor. You don't need to be able to spout off the exact numbers of penetration that your tank has on the exact armor values, what the enemy tanks have, but if you know the general gist of where the weak spots are, and some tanks, for instance, a lot of French tanks have weak turrets, but they've strong hulls, so you shoot at the turrets, or you shoot at the turret cheeks. You don't want to shoot at the gun mantles, but you want to shoot at the edges of the turret that's facing you, or the side or the rear of the turret, that sort of thing, and that will give you advantages. Some of the German tanks that are not stock or not fully upgraded have weak turrets as well. So shooting the turrets is actually more effective than shooting the hulls of the tank. Tiger 2 is a particular case in mind. The E75 until it has the top turret. The Tiger 2 until it has the top turret. The Tiger itself, the turret is actually fairly weak. The Tiger has a lot of flat spaces in the armour. So generally if you're at level with the Tiger, you can penetrate it easily enough. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please press like if you did. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so. I will catch you again soon. Bye for now.